Welcome to Casuals of Runeterra, a very, very special episode. We kept you waiting. Arcane Season 2, Episode 8. I'm your host, Ryan, here with your other host, Hatch.
Yeah, to date this episode, we decided to have a Christmas break. Sue us.
Yeah, plus a bunch of other stuff.
They don't need to know that, all right? We're just having a very fancy Christmas break. Christmas and New Year's.
Very extended Christmas break. And we did it before, one of the most pivotal episodes that we kind of baited you all. We apologize. We planned on doing this literally, in a weekly fashion. And, life took a hold of the reins. But once again, welcome back, guys, gals, non-binary pals, kings, queens, the emperors. This is our episode.
We made it.
We made it. Housekeeping up top. Let's get to it. You listen to us everywhere. You can visit us at Podcast Core for all of our info. You can email us at Podcast Core. Remember, that's podcastcor@gmail.com. Follow us on all the platforms because that helps us with discoverability. And we've seen some people comment that listen on multiple platforms. Some Spotify plus YouTube listeners. So thanks for commenting. Thanks for shouting out. And we appreciate you listening more than once to multiple episodes. But leave a like and comment wherever you listen. We love to see it. We love to read it. It warms our hearts. But the best way is word of mouth has gotten us this far. So tell a friend to explore the valleys and mountains by listening to the Casuals of Runeterra podcast.
The valleys and Kira Mountains.
Spoilers. All right, the story best told in 3 parts. We already gave you our spiel on why we were gone. We're back now. We missed you. Part 1. We start with Mel fighting the chains of the Black Rose and gaining magical powers after breaking them, and she finally gets to speak with that mysterious, shadowy, shape-shifting figure that we've seen before, and they tell her that she was the hidden child by Abessa to be made into a tool, and ultimately now she's gained her own power through the Arcane, and this is to stop her mother's plans against the Black Rose because they could harm Runeterra's future. And I just want to put an exclamation here. We've mentioned in the past, because remember, the show finished before we finished these episodes, obviously, but this is the point where you start to feel the speed, right? The acceleration of the show. And it's clear in this very blatant, kind of out of place exposition at the beginning of this major episode.
It's painfully aware in this episode, or like this scene specifically, because of the fact that we don't know what Ambessa's plans were and how they would actually be a threat to Runeterra. And we don't even talk about it any more than this. It is just like, here you go, Mel. We also don't get any more knowledge as far as with Mel's powers, which I think they handle that a little bit better, because later on in this episode, Mel will even be like, I don't understand what's going on, which is, yeah, sure, you could argue it's a bit of a cop-out, but it's a good way to handle that as far as if you've got to hit the accelerator. But this whole thing, as far as up to this point, it's just been Ambessa's search and hunt for power. And then it's, hey, I need the Hex Tech because that could be a weapon that I could use. And then all of a sudden it's like, you were the weapon Ambessa was wanting. And it's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, we've gotten bits and pieces, and it definitely feels like at this point in the show, like, oh shit, we forgot about Mel. And we've kind of mentioned that as we've gone over this. It doesn't ruin the show, so we want to be clear about that. I mean, we'll talk more about that at the end. But we get the intro after this scene, and then post-intro, we go back to where we left off, where Rictus is getting a proper Noxian burial, which I don't know if we've talked about in past episodes in general, but essentially you're buried in an upright position, and your service weapon is used as your tombstone. It's very common for warrior nations in fantasy to do things like that. And then Singed begins to use Warwick as a conduit to try to revive Victor. And Victor gets to the state where he's able to communicate. He's not back yet, in a sense, and he's able to talk to Ambessa. And Ambessa describes, hey, what if we partner up so that we can both get what we want? I get my army, you get your glorious evolution, and that will allow both of us to, get what we came for. And Victor agrees For one thing, though, the stipulation is that everyone who gets evolved has to be willing. For now.
The key words there are for now, which
Yeah.
is so funny because it's like this is like the first time that like Victor is disingenuine, right? Because he's always had like this moral high ground because he's just trying to not only heal himself but make a better place for Zod,
Yeah.
and then it's always just like I'm working for my community. I am working for my community. And then now it's like, well, since I'm working for my community, everything should be my community. Like I am the solution. And it's like, oh, okay, now the megalomania is starting to set in.
Yep. It's like handing out, supper. It's like one for you, one for me, one for you, one for me, one for me, one for me, one for me. It's like, oh no. Oh no. Yeah, this is the turning point. And then we hop back to Vi waking up from, getting beat up in this whole situation, in a sense. And she's bruised, but she remembers this room very fondly. She's in Kate's house. And next to her is Loris, and he's kind of overwatching her. Well, I didn't mean to drop that. We're not sponsored. Rest in peace.
Hey, throw out a freebie.
Yeah. So he's by her bedside and kind of gives her a short, like, this is where we're at. You were kind of roughed up there. And she finds Kate and confronts her immediately because she finds out that Jinx was locked up and Kate didn't stop them from locking her up. And remember, they're still under martial law, by the way. And they're awaiting Kate's decision because of that on what to do with her. And Kate's struggling with this decision. And Vi's furious when she runs into her because, it's one of those things where Vi's not a talker, right? She's not great at communication. That's kind of one of the breakdowns in the relationship and other stuff, obviously. But she's furious and she believes in her heart that Jinx has changed. She thinks that for the first time, because obviously when Jinx did the act, she wasn't in her right mind. And she says, oh, she now understands what happened, and now she's reckoned with that. And I think she's due for a second chance. We've all done shitty things in this situation. You should give her a second chance. But Kate's still struggling with that.
And like this is a scene that's like you could probably dive in as far as into the inner layers of like why this argument's happening. Like there's a lot of depth here because a lot of the issues isn't necessarily that Caitlyn disagrees with Vi. It's more the sense of a lot of this is now leaning on a mistake that I made as far as with the whole cordial or the martial law and all of the court martial business that she has set herself up as with the whole, Führer.
Yeah.
Like the fascism's kind of put her into a corner. But
she accelerated things.
Yeah, she accelerated things, and then sure, there is also the underlying bit of she killed my mom. Like,
yeah,
like so. There's a lot that you could really break down here, but this is one of the things where it's like we're hitting the accelerator on the story timeline as well. So we're not going to communicate this to each other. We're just going to be pissed at each other.
You made a great point. This falls into the speed aspect that we talked about with the storytelling here, because we don't have many episodes left. So Kate goes to Jinx's cell to confront her and get her to essentially just confess to her crimes. Because at this point, she just wants to hear Jinx say it out loud that I'm a psycho, I'm a monster, and I killed your mother in cold blood, right? That's what she wants. She's not going to get that because Jinx has obviously given up any hope of a happy ending. She knows what she's done because Vi is right in the sense that when Silco was alive and that whole time, that situation, she wasn't in her right mind. And over time, going through the quote unquote Zon rebellion and them fighting back and her becoming a symbol and also being pushing back against that, she's fallen more into having time to analyze what's going on. So one thing we bring up is the timeline, right? You always got to remember a lot of time is passing over the story despite us moving at light speed. So Kate is frustrated and tells Jinx that you're not giving me what I want. And I just don't have any more energy to hate you. with what's going on because Ambessa's on the horizon. And Jinx tells her, the one thing Jinx can give her is that I didn't know your mother would be at that meeting. I didn't attack that meeting because your mother was there. I don't know if that would have made a difference in my decision, but I just, want you to know that. I used more words.
Yeah. Like,
And Kate kind of accepts that and leaves without responding.
yeah, because I believe the exact words are like, I didn't know your mom was there. It probably wouldn't change anything,
Yeah.
but I didn't know.
I gave him
And
the director's cut.
and this is like where like this is something that, like, despite the speed that we're moving at, that I think the writers really did a good job with, which is showing the remorse that Jinx has while also showing that, like, she does see herself as far as like a freedom fighter, right? Like, the remorse here isn't because of her actions. The remorse here is because of the pain that Caitlyn feels,
Yeah.
and Jinx acknowledging the fact that, hey, like, my sister likes you. Like, so it's like, I'm sorry that I hurt your feelings, but there's a bigger cause here, which is the
Yeah.
rights of Zahn, which is the most sane thing that Jinx has done in this entire show.
Yeah, and we've talked to you if you've listened to any of our episodes and you know us, right? We love to focus heavily on the political and the social aspects of Runeterra because it's so well implemented. But what Kate's doing here is she's trying to individualize the pain, right? Which she lost her mother, but the cause of it is so much greater than all that, right? And that's one thing that's Silco drilled into Jinx from the beginning is it's about Zahn versus Piltover. It's what they're doing to us, and anything, any death, and any harm that happens is a result of that pain of who started it, right? Who's the oppressor? Who's setting the standard of violence to be followed?
Yep.
All right, part two. All good stories. We start again with Mel. She's back in Piltover, which that's another thing that I think we forgot was she wasn't there.
Like, the Black Rose kidnapped her just outright. And again, as far as just really kind of hammering in the fact that we're moving at a quick pace,
Yeah.
now that we're back in Piltover, we can confirm we have no idea where Mel went. Like,
Yeah.
since it's a Black Rose, we can assume that it's somewhere like in Noxus, but
Yeah.
Noxus is the imperial nation. There's a lot of Noxus, so where the hell she was, we don't know.
Even the environment is kind of ambiguous that she walked back, by the way. There's no Uber. So she walked back. But anyways, she returns, and the first person she goes to see is Jace. And for the first time since, everything, right? They actually get to have a discussion. And she's like, where the hell were you at? And he doesn't really answer. And she's like, yeah, I went through some shit too, kind of thing. She's having a bit of a discussion for both of them. And then Jace understands that, Mel at that moment, he's like, you're the one that protected me. You're the reason I didn't get hurt in that blast, the attack from Jinx. Why didn't you just save everyone? And Mel has to explain that at that point, she didn't know she had powers. She had no control over them. It was kind of an instinct thing, like, a mother picking up a car to save a newborn, right? Like, it's not something they can just tap into at any moment. It's an adrenaline fueled thing. And Jace is still mad and unreasonable because we know what Jace has gone through. And at this moment, they're interrupted. Because before they're interrupted, he also uses that anger to go into, oh, by the way, you also used Jace, me, and Victor, right? You used
Right.
us, you used our ambition. She tries to explain to him that she was actually protecting them from the rest of the council, and she actually believed in, their heart and their passion, and she wasn't just using them, but she did see the value of them for her, right? As just geniuses in Piltover, right? The city of progress. So then they're interrupted by one of Victor's creations, one of the automatons that we've seen when Jace went to the future, but now they're in the present, and Jace is not pleased with seeing it. And then we get some Sakuga.
Yeah, and like, it's a combination of not being pleased to see it because, this is the stuff that he saw in the future that he is trying to prevent, but this is also on the heels of him thinking that he did prevent it because this is right after he just shot Victor. So in his mind, Victor's dead until he sees this automaton. And right before we get to the Sakuga, like there is a bit of an exchange between him and Victor because Victor's like, "Hey, I do just want to talk," and Victor still wants to be buddies and work together as partners on the stipulation that he joins the great evolution and therefore he just becomes one with the hive mind. Uh, so
Exactly.
not really a partnership. This is like the most blatant snake oil salesman kind of pitch that he gives Jace, and that's why it ultimately leads to Sakuga. But the fight here is not one-sided, despite the fact that it's Jace fighting one of the automatons. It is a fairly even fight throughout a good bit of it until Jace and Mel do get the upper hand, which is terrifying because this isn't even actually Victor. This is just one of his lackeys. So we're finishing the scene knowing that everybody's got a really hard fight ahead.
Yeah, and then once the fight ends and they're able, Mel and Jace are able to kill this automaton or dispatch it, if you want to call it that. We get a shot of Sky's consciousness, within Victor, looking on as he's deciding to move on with his plan. She's kind of slowly fading at this point and very silent. She's not giving any input anymore into his decision making, which is another, representation of him turning. And we then go to back to the cell and we have Jinx, and she's hallucinating about a discussion with Silco about the cycle of violence, as we explained, right? And she understands that she's a part of it. And in that, Silco's convincing her that she's the one that needs to end it. Oh, she's kind of convincing herself, as we find out with some visuals that she is hallucinating this conversation. We don't really know if it happened. It's more, hey, these things he's implied and taught me over the time, I'm using that as I'm remembering him to create this scenario, right? So Vi arrives at her cell during this time frame. Obviously, Jinx is still despondent, and she tries to convince Jinx that it'll be all right. We can start over. Everyone got a second chance. You should get a second chance too. You can do this. And after opening the cell to release her, Jinx punched her in the stomach, slips behind her, and locks her in the cell. And then Jinx says, not to worry about her anymore since she's going to, quote, break the cycle. And then she disappears, leaving Vi very frustrated and helpless in that cell. There's a lot of there's a lot of symbolism here, right? As somebody who's been in prison for 10 years. And she just starts wailing on the wall, which is what she does when she's angry.
Yeah. And she big Angie because she really thought that this was the point where her and Jinx could actually be together as sisters. And that is not how it's working out. And I do love that, like, Jinx is walking away after her little hallucination pep talk of like, I'm gonna go break the cycle. And breaking the cycle, Silco said that killing is a cycle, which means she's just going to stop killing people now, right?
Yeah.
Right?
I
Like, that
mean,
is the healthy response here. And that's totally what she's going to do
yeah.
because Jinx is totally good at healthy ways of healing.
Exactly. Yeah, the way she
Perfect.
slowly backed into that shadow, I think I think that confirms that this is going to be a happy ending.
Oh, Lord. Like, just give this poor girl a break.
Part 3. All good stories. So we get to part 3 here and we go back to Jason Mel with a brief honest discussion where they both calm down, right? They've gone through that moment as well together, and they have an honest discussion. And he apologizes for verbally attacking her, and also helps to reinforce what the Black Rose. Well, he doesn't know the Black Rose told her this, but reinforce who she is, right? Because the thing about Mel is, as one of my favorite characters, she's very competent, very capable, and also pushes back against the idea of what it means to be Noxian, right? While still being powerful and and strong. So Jace is doing that here on his end, is like, listen, you are your own person. You've built this whole life yourself. You're not relying on your mother. You have the power to do whatever you need. You don't need me. You don't need Victor. You don't need any of this. You are great on your own. And I think that's kind of important because as we talked about, I mean, in season 1, you could really tell how Jace kind of started to lean on Mel for sanity, as they had like a brief stint relationship, quote unquote. But he really leaned on her to be his rock, right? To come back to, because he had a lot going on. As you can tell, he wasn't dealing with it well. But yeah, this was a cool small scene to have.
Yeah, and again, because we love to harp on these things on our show, but this is also like a really the first time that, as far as in Arcane, that they really kind of show like a bit of patriotism throughout like the
Yeah,
characters
yeah,
themselves, right? Because Mel is very much pushing against what it means to be Noxian while exhibiting all Noxian traits. Like she still embodies what the core of a Noxian is,
yeah,
while not buying into the ideology as to why.
yeah,
And that is a healthy form of patriotism, right? It's like it is totally fine to criticize the nation where you come from and work to make it better. That's fine. It's totally fine. You don't have to agree with everything as far as your goals are always to make things better. And this is the first time, as far as in the show, that we really get to see that, Mel was trying to make things better. It wasn't necessarily like all a power grab,
yeah.
because especially throughout season one, her motives are very ambiguous.
Hmm.
Except now we really get to see that she really and truly wanted Piltover to be a better place. She wanted to stop the conflict with Zahn, and she wanted to make sure that Noxus wasn't going to turn everything into a war zone. Now that we're here, though, we can see that she fell short on all of those things, which is
Yeah,
why she needs this pep talk from Jace.
that's is so well explained. And just to add a little to piggyback a bit on how you position Mel, for the listeners. So always remember that the she's kind of the antithesis of her mother, because Ambessa is patriotic, but in a way that she's willing to destroy any progress to maintain ideals. Right. So
Mhm.
very important to understand those two dynamics here, as Hetch,
Yeah.
set me up
There,
for.
I mean, with that, it's more of like the difference between like, patriotism and nationalism
Yeah,
right there.
exactly. Yeah. So Jace brings a council together. He's now the head honcho, and it's a council of both Piltover and Zahn leaders, and shows them the body of the automaton. He essentially brings them up to speed, right, of what he's been going through, and tells them what to expect. As Hetch mentioned, it took both him and Mel just to take one down. And he also explains that Mbessa is leading this effort, and that they will need to partner together to fight against both Mbessa and Victor. And as he explains, we get a little montage going on in the background of both cities essentially preparing for this incoming attack.
And that is one of the things that is going to be like the most difficult thing for them to get over this first logistical hurdle is the fact that this is for like both cities. Because right before we get to see the preparations for battle, the end of this little council with Jace saying, "Look, this is about to be a war zone. So if you want, get out, run away. And if you don't run away and you want to stand and fight, that's what I'm going to do. Is I'm going to stand and fight, and I beg you to join me." And one of the very first things that we see once that little monologue is finished is Savika and some other Zonites turning away and just leaving. So right out of the gate, one of the biggest leaders that's left in Zon at this point is already just like, nah, I'm good.
Yeah,
And that is going to be the first big logistical hurdle, because we don't have Silco, we don't have Vander, we don't even have Jinx anymore. It
yeah,
is just Savika and the remnants of whatever Kim Baron survived Jinx's occupation, because
yeah.
Jinx was not pulling punches with anybody.
So that was a very important scene. But now, the more important scene. So we get to Kate, and she comes back to the cell where Jinx was to find a frustrated Vi locked inside of it, having a nervous breakdown. She unlocks it and she goes in as, Vi's verbally beating herself up, for constantly making mistakes. And Kate lets her know that, I planned on you setting Jinx free. I sent all the guards to the Hextech gates on purpose, you idiot.
It- this is really a fun bit because it's the first time that like Caitlyn is now really finding ways to undo some of the damages that she's done, while also just kind of jabbing Vi in the ribs of I know you,
Yeah,
I
it's a
can
it's a
predict
moment
what
of
you're gonna
levity
do.
for her that we haven't seen in a very long time, especially with Ambessa around, right? She just sucks all the energy out of the room.
And well, speaking of sucking energy out of the room, um, we we get to the scene everyone's waiting for.
So we love Sakuga, right? And this counts. So let's get started. So Vi in this moment starts relentlessly kissing Kate, and she's surprised at first but quickly gets into it. Kate pushes her body closer to Vi and starts working her hands up her back. Vi kisses Kate's neck, sliding her hand right down, and removes Kate's coat in a smooth motion. I respect it. Kate, in a moment of realization, pushes away and panically starts mentioning, oh shit, yeah, by the way, I was seeing someone on the side while we were apart and all of the fascism was happening. And Vi says what everyone in the audience is thinking, who fucking cares? She then grabs Kate by the face, dives back in for seconds. Kate responds, and there's a brief moment, which is kind of sweet, where they both kind of look deeply in each other's eyes and smile, and then Kate pushes Vi against the wall. And Vi lowers her hands to start taking off Kate's sweater, but Kate beats her to it and takes off her sweater in this one confident motion and steps back to give Vi, the full view of all the results of her quote-unquote combat training. And then Vi's eyes go wide for the first time, where we see like Vi actually shocked as she sees the Care Mountains on full display. Kate begins to slowly remove Vi's top, revealing her back tattoos, which are sick, but slows down when she notices the bandages from where Kate hit her with her gun in earlier episodes in the stomach. And Vi notices this and sees her getting sad and immediately ramps it back up, grabs her hand, pulls her back in, turns her around and pushes her against the wall. Vi fumbles with Kate's belt and the two start laughing. Then she kisses her neck once again while trailing kisses slowly down Kate's body, and Vi maintains eye contact until she reaches the bottom of Mount Targon. And Kate looks up in ecstasy as she praises Aurelian's soul for this moment.
Oh my god! I hate you so
You got anything to say, Ash? You got any input here? Any more
Whatever
details?
input I had is gone. Oh my god, you suck.
So it goes without saying that I think everyone was very excited. And obviously shout out to to the LGBTQIA plus community, because man, y'all
Oh my
ain't good. All my friends, I was like, hey, how you doing?
Oh my
How you holding
god.
up? How was that hit of
Yeah.
fat?
I was prepared to like really, just be like, hey, it is really nice to see a healthy representation
Yes.
of homosexual relationship
Yep.
on screen. That's because like as far as in like American media, we really haven't had like a truly honest and healthy one since like Modern Family, you could argue.
Yeah.
But no, no, you had to go give the play-by-play.
I only
wasn't
hope
ready.
I only hope we did it justice, right? So then we get we go from one of the greatest scenes in media history to Ambessa and her man. And if you haven't noticed, they turn a commune into a military base, which is so Noxian. And Mel
Oh my
shows
God.
up, and they let her through to speak to her mother. And she tells her mother, I know everything now, right? I know about the Black Rose. She also confronts her about Kino. And this is actually an interesting moment, because this is the first time Mel is like running down verbally, talking down to Ambessa. And Ambessa is like backstepping as she's confronting her, to the point where Ambessa even sheds a tear for the first time that we've seen, as she speaks about the pain of having to sacrifice one child to save another. And this is a good dialogue scene because we get to see the vulnerable side of Ambessa, but quickly see her mentally take it back, right? She takes back that high position of who you talking to. You don't understand what I went through. You'll never understand what I went through, and then starts to become harder and harder as far as mental, right? That's the military in her, and part of this scene is also parallel with she has the runes that were left by Rictus that she put in flames as Rictus did. And she's doing that ceremony we've seen Rictus do as she prepares essentially for war, despite Mel telling her, we can leave together. I'm willing to give you the option of us working together and taking down the Black Rose. I'm not working with them, despite the powers I'm granted or whatever's going on. And Ambessa falls back into her stubbornness and says, no, I have a plan. I insist on that plan alongside Victor, and it's the only way to ensure that we have a chance against the Black Rose. Once again, displaying what Hetch mentioned earlier about both their ideals on display.
Yeah, and this scene really breaks down or kind of shows the audience like the two sides as far as what Ambessa is struggling with, because it's not necessarily that Ambessa's goals have changed. The goal has always been the same. It's
Yeah.
her struggling with approaching her goal as a mother and approaching her goal as a general of Noxus.
Yeah.
Like that, the military mindset does not harbor family ties, because you're giving yourself to a higher cause, which is the cause of the nation, right? Like, and Bessa is someone who we get to see in this scene. She ultimately is putting her foot down and choosing to side with Noxus before siding with her family. And this scene really makes me want to crave more details as far as like what it is that she's doing against the Black Rose, because this is like some nuclear level technology that we got going on with what Victor is clearly showing he can do. So why do you need this big of a nuke? This is a big nuke. But we don't get those details. We just get the final standoff, and it's like, no, this is going to happen. I'm going to work with Victor, and you're either with me or against me. And that's how the scene ends.
And not to foreshadow too much, this is also the reason we're getting a book. More details about the Ambessa book down the road. We're still talking. We're still talking about it and figuring out how we're going to approach this. We've had some people reach out,
but yeah. So spoilers. We are talking about it.
What that timeline looks like with us, who knows?
Coming to a podcast streaming service near you in 2030.
So, despite my Sakuga play-by-play of the Sespian Lex scene, we wrap this episode up shortly after with Singed doing what Victor told him to do, begin the revival process. And that's alongside essentially accelerating the glorious evolution. We get to see this moment, we get the music to start to swell, and then Sky's consciousness just looking at Victor slowly fading away. And at the same time, what's left of Vander's memories are being burned from Warwick, and we're left with just Warwick. And Warwick and Victor's followers begin to ascend upwards while transforming, and then we see a close-up of Victor's face as it splits in half, his human face, and a new evolved face forms in between them. Great design. And that's where episode 8 ends.
Man, and this whole scene, as far as like the glorious evolution being put on display, is so eerie, and it is a perfect way to wrap this episode up, because there's only one episode left, and this is the threat. And boy almighty, does it feel like a threat. Like, they really do a good job of just kind of making your skin crawl while you're watching Victor's face just go, oh, let me open this door real quick. And it's like,
And this takes us to the end here, where the main thing we want to talk about, because it's already been a lengthier one, and we're getting towards the end, right? We have one more episode left, so we'll be able to dig into all the stuff we've wanted to talk about for a month at this point. But the unexpected narrative speed shift, right? And this issue with season two, I think this is a good place to talk about it because this is the episode that really puts on display, oh, we've been moving at a very fast clip for this season. And I don't want to, bring up too many or open too many old wounds when it comes to the final seasons of Games of Thrones. But this immediately triggered with people like, oh, you guys could have used two more episodes, right? Just a bit more to focus on the Mel stuff, a bit more to get the war started because the J stuff gets buried by obviously the the Kate and Vi scene, right, in this episode. And it just feels like a very packed episode, right? It feels like a
It
lot, especially if you're not paying attention up until this point.
I mean, like, especially for someone who's really kept up with like the lore and was really like just trying to watch as much of this and absorb as much as I could in like the first watch. Like, you could get the vibe fairly early on in season two that we're rushing, right? But we noticed that in season one because
Yeah,
of the fact that it's like the the different acts in season one were clearly years apart.
yeah,
So the show has always been moving fast, but the fact that from this episode, it really feels like it's moving a lot faster within itself, just makes it kind of put like a big spotlight on how fast we're going. But I think they did a good job with it, specifically off the fact that the the story is different than what the lore is.
yeah,
Uh, because like the getting to see Victor's powers and the way that he's approaching this grand evolution or the great evolution, like it's not the steampunk
yeah.
bionic evolution that is in the lore. Like it's written out plain as day in his lore that they're taking, augments and adding it onto their bodies,
Mhm.
not Victor being touched by the arcane and
Yeah.
using magic to convert them into these automatons. So the fact that it's like so far removed from what the original lore was makes it feel a little bit better as far as the speed that we're moving at. And I think it also plays into the fact that yeah, I want the answers to the questions I have of like what Mel is dealing with, what Mbessa's goal against the Black Rose was, or even how it started. Yeah, I want those questions answered, but it doesn't take away from the story that I'm watching. Like, so it feels good, despite the fact that it definitely is feels rushed on top of it. So I think they handled that well. If anything, those questions, like I'm looking forward to seeing if the books will answer them, and I love the fact that it's going to give us more content. Uh, the bottom line is that there is some characters of the show that just got did dirty because of the speed that we're moving at, aka Loris. This was the first episode we even get to learn his fucking name.
I was gonna say that, yeah.
Like, these are the characters that got screwed over, but because they got screwed
Yeah.
over, their role in the story is minuscule, and it makes you feel a little bit better because it's like, okay, cool. Yeah, he got screwed, but he doesn't really do anything, so who
Yeah.
cares? Yeah, he woke up Vi from drunken slumbers multiple times, and that's it, right? Like that's his whole fucking
Yeah, I mean,
shtick.
even Lest, right? Which obviously people know I like for obvious reasons. That was the only Vestayan we really got like story for, or some kind of building where there's a ton of cool looking Vestayans that get a lot of like screen reaction time, right? Facial reactions. We have the Vestayan that's always, or that's part of the Firelights, that's always in the background during some of the rebellion scenes. We have
Yep.
the other young stoic Vestayan that's alongside Maddie, right? He doesn't really get any speaking, but he looks cool and his actions look cool. I like to know a bit more about him. And from what we found out post show, I mean, we'll talk about more of this. post our last episode is that there was a lot on the cutting room floor, right? They're really trying to stick the landing after such a great first season, and they did. I think they did, with the caveats. When you create anything, you have to take certain precautions and certain things you don't want to do that you have to do. And this feels like they had to move at a speed because the plan for the future of Arcane, which we'll talk about later, is definitely what they were looking forward to. Is like, hey, let's just wrap this up neatly, so we don't ruin it, but we'll slow down in the future when we have more verticals to express the story.
Right. And this is the foundation block, right? Like it's you need to make sure that the foundation is strong enough so that you can continue to build upon it. And the success of the show kind of speaks for the strength of this foundation to begin with, right? It has been a monumental success. They've already got a lot planned and confirmed that is going to happen, and that gives this foundation gives them the room to where they could end up making a show where they don't have to leave as much cuttings on the ground.
Yeah,
But you got to have the foundation to do it. You've got to bring the people in, and sometimes to bring the people in, side characters end up being fully on the side, and that's what happened here. And it's okay. Like, sure, we don't get to learn a lot about the Vestians, um,
yeah,
and I'm okay with not learning about the Vestians too much in this because it's like if we're going to learn about the Vestians, I feel like that's going to
yeah.
be that needs to be an Ionia storyline, um, and so I'm okay with that. But the fact that it's like we get named characters like Lest, like Lords, and we don't know hardly anything about these characters, and yet they are side by side with very pivotal
Yeah.
storylines. It's like that feels rough, but the storyline's still complete.
Yeah.
And that's what matters. And so it's like, yeah, I can go on my podcast and I could talk about, man, they did Lords dirty, and but that's all that he's gonna get is people like us bringing it up. And the bottom line is that the story is really good, and they've kept it like together. So they did a good job with it. And whether or not you think they could have done better is more of, something that we could discuss. Like you can hit us up podcastcore@gmail.com and we could talk about it.
Yeah.
Like that's
It's
that's
literally
where
the
it
cherry
goes
on
there.
top.
Yep, literally.
So with that, as always, thanks for sticking around. This is a longer one, obviously, because of the hiatus, because of how excited we were to do this episode. We hope we did it justice. I know everybody was waiting for it. So with that, as always, thanks for listening, and we'll be back soon with the final, right? Arcane season 2 episode.
Final Arcane episode right around the corner, and how we're gonna top the absolute monologue of the Kara Mountains that you gave is a tough task. I can't believe you've done this to us.
We won't.
This is our magnum opus.
We peaked.
we peaked on the Kara Mountains. But all right, take care, everybody.